Marcus.
Hello. Hey, Mick.
Hello. Hang on one second.
Too many different options with all the lovely things that we have going on for audio and video. My normal complaint these days is that I have, I think, 5 collaboration tools that I use regularly and 3 or 4 more that are periodic ones.
And you always type at here and annoy all the people.
And it's just, yeah, it's
Yeah.
just.
I woke up recently doing that when someone typed in the PDO channel at here.
I know, man. I'm just a terrible, awful person. Okay, no, wait. I didn't do at here. I did worse. I did at everyone, I think, or something like that. I was like,
Yeah,
frick,
maybe that. I mean,
it was
definitely
at everyone.
all over the world, the Hyperledger Discord users were straight into the bed or whatever time zone it is, alerted by Mick saying something cool happened. Check it out.
Well, okay. Do you know how stupid it is that you make that Discord makes that option available?
Well, I mean, depends
No,
how you
come
use.
on.
No, I mean, if you use a Discord channel with your 3 friends, that's fine to use at here. Also, if you want to announce lunch breaks, also great, I believe.
Yeah.
Well, I use at here on Slack all the time, but only for lunch break announcements.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And
Well,
for
and I
that,
do.
it's well
I mean,
accepted.
it's the at everyone on Teams is exactly what you want because it's constrained to the channel. It's whatever the current set of channel users is.
Oh,
So it's precisely what you want it to be. I want everyone on this channel to be able to get this information. So,
right. Yeah, that makes sense. But there,
uh,
Discord, the difference is that everyone who's on that Discord server is in every channel.
right. Well, and that's this was one of the things that, okay, post stupid action problem, I was kind of going through and it's like, okay, well, the semantics of Discord is really every message goes everywhere and you subscribe to a particular channel for notifications effectively. Right. So it's tagging based, whereas Teams is every channel is a unique, distinct entity. Storage isn't copied. None of the rest of the stuff is copied. And so some of it is the underlying semantics of the messaging platform are just fundamentally different as well. So
Right.
anyway, it was my screw up. I fully admit it. Won't happen again unless I really feel like pissing somebody off. Um,
Well, it
okay,
happens all the time.
whatever. It was yeah. Okay. Anyway, morning, Prakash.
Morning, Mick. Hi, Marcus.
Hi,
Hey, do you
Prakash.
have the link for the document? I never can find that thing.
I can pop up the screen.
Yeah. Well,
Let me.
if you send the link, then we can all add notes to it
Of course.
collaboratively.
Just did.
Thank
On
you.
the.
I'm hoping Bruno gets here because the SGX changes he made, I think we're ready to go in now.
Is
Uh,
Michael also now working again on this
Yeah.
project?
He is.
Great.
Semi sort of pseudo kind of things. We rescued him from the fully homomorphic encryption group.
Yeah, well done.
So, and he is a huge addition to the work that we're doing. So really enjoy having him back. And now I can sick Bruno and Michael together on problems and I know it will get done. Oh, Bruno, didn't realize you were on. I was saying nice things about you.
okay, so do you see my screen?
Yes,
Yes.
I do.
Okay, I just popped it up. Yeah, so Marcus, thank you for attending our meetings. Yeah, I think having you here will add the very important like
Additional
yes,
voice
yes.
that doesn't
Yeah, I
work
was
at
looking for the right
Intel.
word, yeah. Yeah, not just the additional voice, the
Are you
critical
saying that Marcus has a voice of reason? You don't know Marcus very well, if
I
that's
don't
what you're
know. I
gonna
don't know
say.
him at all. I don't think I've met Marcus. This is my first time with Marcus, unless if I am forgetting something.
No, I think we haven't met. I mean, I was visiting you guys, what, 4 years ago
Oh,
in
really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Portland?
Okay. Then yeah,
But
my bad.
I don't
I
think
forgot.
that we met
Yeah.
there.
Okay. Okay, good. So yeah, so this is like other like Hyperledger Labs community meeting. So this is a Hyperledger Labs community meeting for the private data objects, right? So we have an antitrust policy, and so basically we welcome contributions from all the community participants. Everybody is equally important, right? This is not a project just by Intel, right? And of course, no sharing of confidential information, please, right? Yeah, so let's move on. And so I hope this time is going to work out for everybody, including you, Marcus. So I
Yes, this
wasn't,
is much
yeah.
better than Friday evening.
Yeah, I will apologize. It was the original time was David and I were sitting down, kind of looking at the calendar, and we're like, well, there's nothing else on Friday. We might as well pick that one up because it'll have the least conflicts. Then I'm starting to do the math on, the dates. So my bad. I
And
admit that
if
I was being a pain, and I think we fixed it. So good.
and just let me know if I got your last name right, Marcus.
It's perfect.
Okay. Okay, so I wasn't there in the last meeting, so I wasn't sure if you had anything specifically that you wanted to discuss this time, Mick and Bruno, or is it an open agenda?
I think the agenda needs to be open, but I do want Bruno to kind of go through what the current status is of the PR. I think we've got all the testing done. That this is the SGX Docker one. I
Okay.
think we've got all
Yep.
the testing done for it. I'm gonna run a final test on the cleaned up commits just to make sure sim mode is all functioning correctly. But my plan is to merge it unless there's some other issues that anyone has. So Bruno, I guess my question would be just, can you walk through the commit log and what you expect from us on this?
Okay, so I just stopped sharing. Okay.
And by the way, looking through the commit log itself, looks fantastic. Thank you for taking and making the effort to do it.
Thanks.
Considering the state it was in last night, I will say thank you very much. So. Anyway,
Yeah.
so you want to walk through what all has changed on this, and is there anything else we need to
Yeah,
specifically
so
go looking for?
let me see where the sharing button is here.
It's at the bottom of the screen with it's the third button from the left in the center pane.
Share
Put,
screen.
yeah, put
The
your mouse
green
down
one.
at the
Okay.
bottom. Yeah.
Time is a different one. What's this shop? Think I'm sharing the right one.
Yeah, I can see
Okay,
private data objects page.
so PR for 77. So these are really the modifications that I had before. I just squashed them, and then, well, not really squashed. I reset and made 3 commits out of them. My internet is really slow today. Okay, so frankly, the commits are not super clean in the sense that these are disjoint commits. so they can be tested separately, etc. But really, the work overlaps in the sense that we talked about removing some environment variables, and let's say the operational removal already happens in the first commit because I needed that to make SGX work. The final removal in the end happens like in the second one, so to make the commit smaller, essentially, at least the first one.
So I have a quick question here. 477. I thought this was all about getting SGX to work within Docker, right? I mean, this makes it sound as though PDO did not work in SGX hardware mode before this PR.
It didn't. It worked on Bruno's machine.
That's not true. I don't understand
Okay,
that.
it didn't work on, none of the proxy code was working correctly, for example. We had some horrible implementations and inconsistencies in the way we were doing environment variables and the whole rest. So my original request was, let's separate this into multiple PRs. One which cleans up the environment variables and makes them more consistent, one which fixes the proxy issues, and one which adds it to Docker. Bruno, I think quite correctly found that they're so intertwined with one another that it was easier to just do it as one big PR.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it is a
Yeah.
huge we literally had 5 different, I think it was 5 different environment variables, some of which were immediate values, some of which were pointers to directories, and some of which were names of files. I mean, that kind of inconsistency. So
Okay. So it's really like improving PDO in hardware mode rather than fixes.
yeah, and I mean, you can call it whatever you want to call it, but the list of things that we have here is the list of stuff that needed to be done. So
Sure. I mean, my only concern is that I don't want to give the impression that people that PDO did not work in hardware mode before this PR, which is not factually true.
well, it worked
Well,
on your
technically,
machine. It
Yeah,
never, I could never get it to work because it never worked behind the proxy for me.
yeah, I mean, technically you're right, because I don't think I changed any code specifically. So I had to fix the proxy thing for, well, mostly for us. And for the Docker testing, we needed, we need the mounting the volumes and the devices to use Docker.
Are you referring here to this big Intel proxy you guys sitting behind?
Yes.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
a pain in the butt. At
Yeah,
least when
I'm-
we're dealing with these things like IIS and the rest, because we have to special case because you put .intel.com in your no proxy if you want access to any services inside and any of the machines you have inside. But that means that the IIS gets a no proxy, which means you can't get to it. So you have to have special code in order to, I mean, it's a pain in the butt.
Right. I remember that Michael also added a bunch of things to our FPC Docker dev environment in order to make this working for him.
Right.
Which, I mean, I never tested it because there is no proxy here.
Well,
Um,
it wouldn't have, you wouldn't have had the problem even if you had a proxy, because your proxy would not have included .intel.com in your no proxy.
hmm.
It really is completely unique to our environment, and it's
No,
it's like I
so-
said, it's just either make everything work through the proxy or nothing work through the proxy and whatever. Anyway. So
Anyway, Prakash, this is a good list of the things that went in this PR in the end. Small things, but scattered here and there. Okay, so
So Prakash, if you have updates, I'm marking my approval. Oops. On it.
This is no. I
So
don't
you
have any
have-
updates since
You
I
have
need
until like
to.
noon and to approve
No,
it.
this is good. Don't wait for me, because the only way that I might be able to give any updates is if I get to Azure and test it out and try to understand what's going on. Reading the code is not going to really um, make me give any intelligent comments. I don't think I'm that capable. Yeah.
I understand that. I mean, the modifications are scattered here and there. So anyway, let me just say that the big highlights of this PR. So for Docker, so we have many images. Now the base images are SGX mode agnostic because they don't need to know about SGX, and they just carry the basic stuff that we need. I added a new target just to build the Docker's PDO services here, and that's the only. Well, it's the only image that really needs to be SGX mode aware. And I say the only one because the CCF one only needs the SGX mode to start in a specific way. Otherwise, I don't think you would need that anyway. And when you build the Docker images, you have the same images as before. But if you build for SGX, you additionally get this image here. So the PDO services SGX. So it's typed or tagged differently, and it avoids confusion with the others. The other big thing is that now there are, let's say, 3 additional steps or script in this Docker build. The first one, and so 2 are at build time, and 1 is at runtime. So at build time, actually on the host, what happens is that the IS certificates are, retrieved and passed to the Docker build. And this similarly happens for the enclave signing keys, which are here somewhere. Should be the... Okay, I don't find them. It's in the repository somehow. Clone repo. Yeah, it's this one here. So if there is an enclave signing key from the host, it's basically passed to the Docker build. And this was actually painful to figure out because at build time, when you do the Docker build, you cannot mount volumes. So all the material must be already available. By doing these 2 steps, we're able to allow the host or whoever is using PDO to provide an enclave signing key if they have it, and this would be related to the MR signer. And for the IS certificates, this avoids contacting IS from Docker through
the build. Yeah.
during the build, basically. The third step is about the SGX keys, namely the speed in our case and the speed API key. Though there is a documented way to provide them in default folders or a folder specified by the host, and these are passed to the container through the Xfer folder, essentially. So we use that to transfer all the material. So these are the big things that change to the Docker build, but everything is automated. There are also default values for several things except the SGX keys. For example, you don't need to specify the enclave signing key. One is available, good. If it's not available, it's generated randomly.
So I have a question. I have a question going back to our like original discussion on this. All started because we wanted to also change the way like enclaves get registered with the 2 new APIs that we had recently implemented in CCF, right? So like, how does this PR utilize that behavior, in the sense that what I was under the impression was that when we first start a period services container, there is an option that we give from outside as part of Docker to run that would invoke the registration of the MR enclave, or there's also an option that if I start a second services container, there has to be an option where I do not register in new MR enclave, but I just validate against what's already registered. And the question is, how do we even test that behavior, because we always only start one services container?
So I'm not sure I understand what you're saying. So,
Yeah,
so there's a lot to unpack in what you just said. And by the way, Marcus had his hand up, so let's make sure we get back to Marcus before, before too long. I heard several things in there. Okay, so number one, registration only requires one enclave to come. The initial policy registration in MR enclave only requires us to have one enclave. We only have to bring it up long enough to pick up the information that we need in order to send it to the PDOTP to get the MR enclave registered, right, for the initial policy. Every enclave that starts then has to go through its own registration process, which basically proves that it matches the policy that we recorded from the initial enclave. So number one, I come back to what I said, and I think we have an outstanding issue on this. I want to see the document for the registration process. I have still not seen that. Right, and that goes through, that is both, I think, something Bruno, you and Prakash have to get together and finally write. So it's scattered in the script documents down in CCF right now, but we need something that pulls that out and captures the full flow of the registration process. The second thing I think I'm hearing you say, and I'm not sure I understand completely what your comment was, Prakash, on this, is
So I can explain again.
purpose.
So yeah.
Well, for the purposes of tests, we're only going to run one. But it does bring up the other question that I've been asking, which is, you have not really written any tests for the PDOTP. And we really, I mean, at some point, that the assumption is that the system tests are sufficient right now. And I don't buy that. I mean, it's a good first step, right? The system tests are useful for it, but we have to go back. We don't have any negative tests for the registration process or for the PDOTP.
Yeah, I agree that we do not have a PDOTP test. That is a whole different topic. But this is assuming that there is a well-functioning PDOTP. So what I had originally understood based on what we're discussing was that I also agree with your fact that to register the expected MR enclave, you only need to start one enclave. Correct. The point is the way we start, like any enclave, is now via the PDO services container. Right. So if I start the PDO services container, there has to be an option as part of the starting of the PDO services container to tell the container to go and register the MR enclave with the ledger. Right. So, if it is, and
it's already in there.
Okay.
It has been in there for a while. What Bruno's PR does is flush out the code and make it work. But there has been an option in the registration to do the registration.
No, but as part of, but there should also be a starting parameter for the service container where I do not do any registration.
There.
Okay.
It is there.
Okay.
I would suggest you go take a look at the code.
Okay. Okay.
Because it is there.
Okay. And okay, the point is now the next point is, even if it is there, there has to be a test in a run test where, or in Docker test, where I do not assume that all enclaves are started via the same services container, because it can only be started under one mode.
That is exactly what we're assuming, is that the enclaves are all for the moment, that the enclaves are all started through the same service container, because that's well, let me say that, through the same image. They are containers that are coming through the same image. They need not have the same container.
Right. So can we add another container in the Docker Compose file, services 1, services 2, where services 1 starts just one enclave and services 2 starts by default some more enclaves. And services
Is
2 does
there-
not attempt to register anything.
I think that's a great idea. Go ahead and write the code for it because you're
Okay.
gonna need all of that in order to write. I think that has to be in the context of writing the rest of the test.
Sure, yeah. No, I
Right?
agree.
So I think the first thing to get done on this, what you're describing is exactly right, right? This is not a new conversation. So why don't you put together a test plan for what it takes to actually test the PDO-TP? And then let's go back, rather than kind of throwing stuff in haphazardly. Tell me what it takes to test the PDO-TP, what the configuration is that you're gonna need for
No,
it.
this is not a test of the PDO-TP. What we are discussing now is not a test of the PDO-TP.
It absolutely is. The registration process involves the PDO-TP. The local pieces of this are pretty straightforward.
Okay. Fair enough, yeah.
We have, I mean, if you're talking about, can we start additional containers off of the same image and have those containers be registered? That is an additional test. Okay, so write the document for it.
Okay.
Throwing additional random things in there is lovely, but we'll end up in the same situation we've been in with this, that what we really need is a plan for how do we test the PDO-TP? How do we test the assumptions that we're making about similarities between containers? Can we register, Bruno, this is for you. If you start up a registered container and then you start a second container from the same image, will the enclaves be available, or will the e-services be available? You understand what we're asking for, right? We are making an assumption that every enclave that's generated from a container derived from the image that we're creating here will be able to register successfully. Okay, we're by the way, we're overloading a couple of words here. So there is register the policy, which is the interaction with the PDO-TP, and then there is register the enclave with the TP so that we can use the services in it. So I think there's some additional testing that Prakash is pointing out, which I think is exactly right. But this is pot calling kettle black, Prakash. Start writing your own PDO-TP test.
Yeah. Okay.
So completely agree with everything you're saying. I don't think it's required for this particular PR, but we have a big gap on testing the whole sort of registration process with hardware enclaves.
Not sure if Marcus had a question before.
Yeah, Marcus, go ahead.
Yeah. So what was the question 5 minutes, 7 minutes ago? Well, yeah, I wanted to actually ask. I mean, Bruno said something that now it's possible to build certain images independently of hardware or simulation mode. And I remember there was something with the SGX SSL dependency that you actually have to compile it always for hardware or always for simulation mode. I don't know. Is this related to SGX SSL?
Yes and no. So this is our base image, for example, and I removed all the SGX mode to make it agnostic. Okay, and so this has the SDK and all the things. Now, here, if you see, this is SGX SSL compiled with SGX mode sim. This is because the SGX mode in SGX SSL only impacts the tests. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So this determines whether the tests are in sim mode or in hardware mode. We don't
I
care.
see. But you can then still use the build artifacts of SGX SSL also for hardware mode.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, so this was the first question. Then the second question was that I kind of lost what is Dockerized here. But I mean, this is also due to my lack of knowledge about PDO. What is a PDO service? What are the Docker images? Is this do you have something like what we have in FPC, a developer image which you can then download, start a container, and then inside you have everything you need in order to compile PDO things? That's my first question. Does this exist?
So yes and no.
Oh, cool.
Yes, the Docker images that we can create allow for that functionality. In fact, that's exactly how we use it inside. We have our own repository that we push the images to that we can use on multiple machines for that. And no, we do not have permission to push to a public repository where you could download them.
So that means
If
that
you were to build them and push them up to a public repository, that would be fine. We cannot.
well, if I create a PR on the PDO lab in order to push the base PDO images to GitHub,
Yes,
that I could do that.
you could do that.
Oh,
The images that we create, and in fact, for all intents and purposes, everything we do now is through the images. So there
Right.
are base service images, which you should be able to start in a relatively straightforward way. If you look at there's Docker Compose files in this directory that will start local network, connect you to a remote network, whatever you want for it. There is a client image that you can pull up and start and use for contract development, and that's exactly what we do in the PDO contracts repository for most of our work. Right now, the main way that we build a user client is through a container that's running Jupyter, and so you interact through notebooks. It's not by the way, it's not my favorite user interface, but it was the fastest thing we could get that would actually do a reasonable job of giving us a UI. So.
Okay, so in an ideal world, when a developer wants to build a PDO application, he just, writes whatever, and then he downloads a bunch of PDO base images and runs a make script, which then takes whatever he writes, bundles it together in a new image, and then he can use Docker Compose for local testing.
Yeah,
and then he doesn't need to do, all this insane things like compiling
you do not have
SGX
to do any of
dependencies.
the SGX
Right.
compilation. That's exactly right. So
Yeah.
in PDO, we think of three different kinds of developers, right? There's the core services developers. These are the people who are trying to go in and modify the code in the enclave, optimize the performance in the interpreter, provide additional functionality for the interpreter, right? There's the core service developer. There is a contract developer, somebody who doesn't really care what the services are doing, but wants to build applications on top of PDO. So it's the contract developer. And then the third is the contract user. So somebody wants to come in and actually take advantage of the data marketplace that we're creating, or use the models that Prakash is now making available through NFTs that way. So it's the contract user. So the contract user generally will open up one of the Jupyter client containers, which manages all the keys and the configuration. Everything is all set up so that in theory you should just be able to kind of interact with the network and the contracts. The contract developer can pop up the client, a container from the client image, and begin development. All of the tools for doing development of contracts are available inside that image. So you can build the client contracts. And then the services developers can do the services. In theory, the services base should not be changing very often at all,
Hmm.
which is why we split those up. And you should be
Okay.
able to do service development that way that you're talking about.
Cool. Thanks.
So it should, in theory, it should all be there. So in practice, it more or less works the way we want it to. So
Always
Bruno, I have,
converging.
yeah, I mean, it's a heck of a lot better than it was 2 years ago or whatever it was. So I think that's the fact that we have shifted most of our development to applications on top of it is an indication of the maturity that I think the platform has now. So, Bruno, I had a question for you, and with Marcus here, I think this is a great time to have this discussion about. So right now we're still kind of IIS EPID based. You want to talk a little bit about what's the plan for decap support?
What's the plan for data support? So Marcus heard me talking about
And
that
by the way, okay, so
multiple
this is where I'm
times.
gonna, by the way, this
Wait.
is where I'm gonna, Bruno, I'm gonna remind you, number one, this is open conversation, no confidential information or proprietary information, number one, and number two, it's recorded.
Yes, yeah,
So-
I know. So thanks for
So-
the reminder.
Any dirty laundry that we happen to have about the frustrations of our own internal processes should not be aired in this forum.
Yeah, so the initial idea that I had to publish it separately, well, it went away. However, I still have the working code with the architecture that I wanted to push for FPC, cleanly separated in the attestation API folder, just how it is right now. So technically, I already have everything there, but that's just the code for the attestation API that works with the EPID and with the Intel Trust Authority. So it's still a paid service that we can use and nobody else can use it at this point, or you have to enroll somehow. So that's a problem. What I don't have and what we need for Hyperledger at this point is, well, DCAP support with the DCAP library. Something open, free, that can be easily used. Now, in PDO, we need the DCAP verification inside the transaction processor in CCF. And in FPC, we need that in the enclave registry, which is also a smart contract on Fabric. So I think the plan would be to keep extending that API with a third option, which is the Open DCAP library, the use of the Open DCAP library. Make sure that that can be compiled on smart contracts so that it doesn't have external dependencies of any sort, particularly time related, because that's one problem that I have with the JSON Web Tokens, is that you need a source of time to verify them, or you need to provide it somehow.
So-
And
Okay, so just a quick
And publish
question on that.
Yeah.
So, okay, so we run into this issue with time a lot. Should we spend some time thinking about what assertions we can make about time and how we would go about doing it in a more general way? I mean, I've written some contracts in the past that went out to the whatever the 869, I can never remember which one it is. This, the timestamp secure time servers, right? And you can build a reasonable policy that basically says, give me 3 timestamps with some subset of my trusted time servers signed by my trusted time servers, and you can actually get some timestamping for an event. That's pretty reasonable for that.
Can
It's
I
very much a one-off and is very complicated, and it's hard to get it right.
can I make quick comments?
Yeah.
Okay, I have so many comments, but let me start with the last one. Yeah, so I don't know if there are specific formats for reports that contain time information, but for a start, does it make sense to assume that anybody who wants time goes to PDO-TP, asks it for time, PDO-TP signs that yes, it is PDO-TP's untrusted time, but it is an institutional trust, assuming that PDO-TP is deployed and managed by a consortium, and you get a signed report. And the point that we're going to use inside the contract is we are going to verify the signature. We can always replace the verified signature with something else that you're saying down the line.
So yes and no. Yes, we could use the PDO-TP for the source of time. It's no different than going to the trusted time servers, except that it becomes a custom API rather than a common IETF protocol. So that's one. But the second thing is that you would have to support this interface across a multiplicity of PDO-TP servers, because you're not going to trust any one of them by itself to provide that information.
That is true. That we have to see how to do that in CCF, whether you can get
Right,
a
but
read
that's-
API from
then my
just a
point
read
is-
API. Yeah.
Right, but then my point is that why do that instead of just using the existing standard protocols for it?
Sure. Yes, we can. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because this was something under our control, and yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Well, it's under our control, but again, we're re-implementing something. We're creating a custom implementation for something that already exists in the
Okay.
standards.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay. Okay. I fully
It's not, I
support
mean,
your,
it's
yeah.
not an easy, there are my point is there are libraries, there are services that are already doing this. It's a standard, well understood protocol. The semantics are understood.
Okay.
I think the fastest path to making this work is looking at the existing
Okay.
implementation.
Okay. Okay. And this
So-
next question.
Sorry,
okay.
go ahead, Marcus.
Yeah, I'll pause.
No, sorry. I think you had multiple questions. I didn't want to interrupt.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know I can wait, but I'll ask this very quickly. This is a question to Bruno, right? I heard you say that you cannot publish something to PDO repo that uses ITA. I do not quite understand, nor do I agree, and I think we should strongly push back against any such rules, in the sense that we are not saying that we're going to completely abandon EPID. The PDO will continue to run with EPID or decap, and for those of who you want to use with decap, this is what we have now. You're always welcome to contribute to more solutions. So there should not be anything stopping us from publishing an ITA based solution.
Well, okay, just a reminder, I just got the notification that IIS goes away April 20 something of next year.
Right,
April of next
right.
year, right? So whatever we do, we have to be able to drop support for IIS, okay? Because it won't exist.
Fine.
So that's
Okay.
not optional. That
Fine.
has to happen.
Okay.
So that's number one.
Okay.
If you're asking, should we drop support for ITA? No, I don't think
Yeah.
anybody, including Bruno, is suggesting that. I think you suggested we add something. There are benefits to using ITA, right?
Exactly, right. So my point is,
it's a
can
nice
we,
service. I just don't want to
yeah.
pay for it.
That's correct. So can we have code in PDO as part of the official repository that says how to use PDO with ITA? Like that
Yeah,
should be
I don't see
perfectly
any reason.
fine. So why don't we make
Okay,
that
so
PR
Marcus,
first? Yeah.
this is a question for you. So ITA, with the Intel Trust Authority, gives us the quote verification and trust that we need. Has some really nice properties that we could take advantage of. It is a proprietary service. The intention, and this is kind of the reason why we've been slow to make the shift to DCAP, is we want to make sure that we can support both open source implementations using the Open DCAP library for it, which requires a lot more infrastructure, a lot more work on the part of the user to understand and get the infrastructure set up for it, as well as ITA. For a Hyperledger project, can we keep the proprietary interface in as long as we support a free interface as well?
Well, I mean, the question is, I mean, who are the users and where do they run their stuff? I mean, do they run their stuff locally? Then yeah, they have to do the DCAP madness to install at home. Great. I did this exercise once and I didn't understand what I'm doing there, but it was working in the end of the day. But then if I look at other people who are using FPC on Azure, for instance, they would like to use this Azure attestation service.
Right.
And then I'm asking myself, okay, so what is the API or what is the DCAP library we need to use? Is the open source DCAP library compatible with Azure? Would that also be compatible with, what did you say, ITA?
Right.
ITA?
Intel Trust Authority,
So it's not
which
Intel
is
attestation
basically the
service.
same as, no, it's the same as, well, it is an attestation service.
Yeah. But there was also something else from Intel. Or was this
Amber, but
rebranded?
it was Amber that was rebranded. ITA is Amber rebranded.
I
So-
see. Okay. Yeah, I mean, so I mean, those are my thoughts on this type. So I ideally I mean, as Bruno suggested, you have a nice little component which basically abstracts whatever implementation you would like to inject then during runtime, and then it just works. I mean, this is really a hassle that I mean, if the code would not run on Azure or on the IBM cloud or not run on your local machine anymore with proper attestation. I mean, even for testing. And so then, I mean, regarding Epit, I also this morning I received an email saying, hey, reminder, end of life pre-warning, SGX Epit, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, and this again, I mean, therefore it's interesting that we're actually talking about that. When I was it last year, working on the Go support for FPC chaincode using the Ego compiler, which is, if I remember correctly, based on Open Enclave, which comes with their own implementation
that's edgeless, right?
Well, Open Enclave is Microsoft.
No,
No,
it's not edgeless. Yeah.
no, I meant Ego.
Yeah,
Ego is
edgeless. Exactly.
Ego
They
is
built
edgeless.
they built on top of Open Enclave.
Right.
And they only support whatever Open Enclave in terms of attestation. Only support the mode Open Enclave supports, which is DCAP. No Epit at all. I mean, from the beginning.
Correct.
And my question would be, I mean, can't we also just use the Open Enclave attestation library in PDO and FPC? FPC C++ version? Would that be just compatible? And could we just link it? Then we don't have to write anything in new code.
I don't think you're solving the
Maybe.
problem of because like Open Enclave is a replacement for like SGX SDK, right? So
Exactly.
whether you use like Open Enclave SDK like or SGX SDK, you still haven't solved the problem of the attestation service infrastructure. That is still that still needs to be deployed either by the user if they don't want to resort to a paid service, or you have to go to a paid service like ITA, or you assume that all your infrastructure is inside Azure, in which case you can take advantage of Microsoft Azure attestation, right? So, I mean, so my point is that yes, it would be fantastic for PDO or like any SGX project to support an infrastructure that takes advantage of like open source components, but that's a lot of hard work. And if anybody wants to make that contribution, then let them do it. But that should not stop others who wants to use PDO in hardware mode from
Right, but
doing contract development, right?
I don't, okay, so let me rephrase the question, Marcus. If the only, okay, and this is not our plan, to be clear, right? If the only thing we supported was MAA and ITA, would Hyperledger have an issue with that? Because the only support, so what you end up with is the only two attestation backends that you could use would be the Microsoft one or the Intel one.
No, I think that's, I mean, in terms of if this is okay for a Hyperledger project, I would say absolutely, because we are already building something which only works on Intel machines.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it's good that we basically, I mean, would go one step further and not only support the Intel attestation infrastructure, but also have something else. But I mean, this is not in order to, I don't know,
My
make more
concern
money
is
for the
that it
particular company.
makes,
It's more about, I mean, make it easy for your project to be adopted.
right, and so there are pros and cons to that. I mean, clearly what would have to happen is you've got to figure out what your story is for developers. And how does a developer migrate from a simple closed infrastructure to a professionally managed infrastructure like MAA or ITA, if you're going to do that? Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, this
So-
local infrastructure, I mean, we're talking about distributed ledger technology. Well, I mean, in production,
Attestation backend is not DLT. That's the problem.
no, that's true. But I mean, the environment where you run your stuff, then, I mean, why would you run the stuff in your local environment where you provide your local attestation environment? This I don't know.
Well, where I was going with it is maybe the approach is for a developer, you just drop attestation because you don't have the threat model that you're concerned about.
For developer, you mean for when we are playing with
For
this
somebody-
technology?
Yeah,
For
so
testing.
for somebody who is testing, for somebody who's developing and testing, they can test with no attestation at all.
Yeah, I think, I mean,
Right.
for
And
testing, you should
that
go,
becomes the simple thing. And for if you want to deploy a service, then you turn on the ITA or MAA bit.
I
depending on where you're
absolutely
gonna
agree.
install
I
it.
would even
That
say
actually
that
feels
you
like a
only
better way
need
of doing it.
simulation mode for testing and development. I mean, if I want to be a user, or so if I'm a developer for something really cool, something really new, and I want to use PDO, I mean, I would like to develop this on any machine I have available, even without SGX, on an AMD box, on a Mac, right? The development and quickly testing if the stuff compiles and executes should be independent of the actual hardware requirement of the confidential computing technology. Then doing deployment or
Right.
I don't know, certain integration tests, then you need at some point the real hardware. For hardware mode, you need the real attestation. Yes, great. And then for deployment, for sure. But I mean, for development? So
By the way,
thing,
there are some times when it's useful to do the hardware mode for development because the performance implications are not always obvious. But yes, I 99% of my development is simulation mode. So
agree. But so I mean, for performance evaluation, then this is yet something again you usually won't
Right, but
run
this
on
is
your
where I wanna
laptop
go.
while watching something on YouTube and writing emails. This is I
I'm gonna
understand
push
this.
it that right, but I'm gonna push it. I can do that. I can push it to Azure, run my performance tests on Azure while I'm watching YouTube videos or a basketball game or whatever it is.
Right.
Right.
No. So what I wanted to say, last year we had this mentee from the Hyperledger mentorship program.
Yep.
And he was struggling a lot to even make FPC in simulation mode running in his environment. At some point, I mean, with Bruno's help, we were figuring out that he actually had an AMD CPU, and some component was just not compiling, even in simulation mode on AMD.
Yes, we fixed that.
Exactly, but I mean, it took a while, and I mean, for an easy start with something like that, the burden should be reduced as much as possible. I believe.
Yeah, I agree. So by the way, if you look at the green line, I think it's marked as 80. That's the one we had to add for exactly that problem.
Right.
So it
Yeah.
turns out that GitHub runners moved from Intel CPUs to AMD CPUs, and that's where we started noticing the break.
Exactly. Yeah, I also
So
remember
it's
this.
fixed. It's fixed
Yeah.
now. But yes, I'm assuming FPC's already picked this up, right?
No, yeah, Bruno added this, of course. But I just wanted to mention it, how amazing Bruno's work is on FPC.
Good. Cool. Okay. I'm gonna have to go here in just a second. But I think that, so stepping back, I think there's a couple of takeaways on this. One is, Bruno, I just went and did the approval for it. As soon as Prakash hits the button for the approval, I will do the merge on this one. Then we've got a couple others queued up that I think we should be able to finish and merge today as well. So this one, then Michael's small one, and then the service groups one, I think are all ready to go. All right. I'll come back and I'll say, I think Bruno, you and Prakash need to get together and actually do the documentation, number one, for what the registration process is. And number two, the hardware mode assumptions we're making are not well tested at all. The only tests that we have effectively right now are system tests. Did the system continue to run? And in particular, there are no negative tests whatsoever in the code for any of the work that we have. That is a gap that has to be filled. So I think there needs to be a test plan and just create an issue for it and start putting, whatever notes we have for how we want to go about doing this. Prakash has some good ideas about kind of how we sequence or how we build out multiple enclaves. I think there's a very interesting observation here about we're making an assumption that the MR enclave will register across multiple containers derived from the same image. Let's make sure we test that. We're making an assumption that we can start the one container up, register the enclave information, register the enclave policy, and start another container later, and it will work correctly. We have not verified that yet. So I think there are several things in here that are things we believe and are very reasonable to believe, but we're not testing. And I'd feel a whole lot more comfortable if we had some tests for it.
So Mick, can you just get a private GitHub runner with SGX support?
We have asked a couple of times. It turns out that it's a little harder. The approach we're kind of looking at right now is we have some SGX servers that we have connected outside the firewall. And Marcelo's been kind of poking around looking at what it would take to actually make those available so that we could use those for our runners.
What about the other SGX projects? I mean, like the SGX driver, which is also on open source on GitHub developed. Do they use SGX-based runners?
Yeah, I believe that they use private runners for SGX stuff.
I mean, can't you just ask them if you can also use them?
We could. Yeah, I know what the answer will be. So
because I think, I mean, yeah.
We have had conversations with those groups. They do not want us. They don't want to give up control of the resources that they are using for their own development.
Kind of makes sense.
it's.
Expected.
yes.
Yeah.
So right now, like I said, that, you know, we have some resources, we have them outside the firewall. There's an open investigation as to what it will take for us to make private runners off of our own servers available so that we can do hardware testing.
I think that would be really great. I mean,
The second alternative, and to be honest, a lot of even the internal Intel development is done on Azure. The second approach is to just create a test environment that will run on Azure.
Hmm.
So the question you're asking is one we have been asking for quite a while as well and don't have an easy solution for. So.
yeah, I think I also asked this before. Yeah, I think it's
And
good to.
I
mean,
assume that this is something, if we do it, FPC would take advantage of it as well.
Ideally, yes. I mean, it would
Mhm.
be, I mean, enhance so much the confidence in the project if
Absolutely.
GitHub tells you, yeah, it works in hardware mode. Great.
Yep.
Good job, guys. And then the community is super happy that this is well tested. Nobody can blame us for writing sloppy code. All right. No, I think super happy to join this meeting here today. Great discussions.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Marcus, thanks for joining.
Thank
I guess
you.
I have to
Talk to
sign
you
off,
in 2
for sure.
weeks.
Thanks.
Ciao.
Yeah. Have a good day. Bye, everyone.